As U.S. Republicans gather in a few hours, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be taking part from an ocean away in Israel. The top U.S. diplomat met with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a short while ago in a very COVID-era way with an elbow pump, assuring him that Israel will retain a military advantage under any future U.S. arms deals with the United Arab Emirates. U.S. politics are also on Pompeo's agenda. A source says he will record an address for the Republican convention, which is this week, of course, praising White House foreign policy. Well, Lauren Liebman is following events in Jerusalem for us and joins us. Now, let's talk about these F-35s, because there is a lot of confusion about whether or not this Israel-Emirates peace deal came with permission for the UAE to purchase these F-35 fighter jets, which would be an upgrade from what they currently use or fly, those being F-16s. What have we learned from Mike Pompeo?
Well, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the United States would and is legally obligated to keep Israel's QME, its qualitative military edge, in mind when it moves forward with any arms deal. He certainly said arms deals with the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, are under review, but the QME for Israel would always be at the heart of it and would always be maintained. It was one of the things he made sure to mention in his statement after meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu, for his part, said he wasn't aware of any arms deals as part of the normalization agreements, sticking to his guns here, which is the line he's held all along, that he knew nothing about the F-35 sales or intention to perhaps sell F-35s to the UAE. Here's their statements from the earlier today.
The United States has a legal requirement with respect to qualitative military edge. We will continue to honor that. But we have a 20-plus year security relationship with the United Arab Emirates as well, where we have provided them with technical assistance and military assistance. We will now continue to review that process to continue to make sure that we're delivering them with the equipment that they need.
I have to say simply that this deal did not include Israel's acceptance of any arms deal, and I don't know of any arms deal that has been agreed upon. It may be contemplated. Our position hasn't changed.
Pompeo certainly left the door open to U.S. arms sales of the F-35 to the UAE. Jared Kushner spoke about that over the weekend with Fareed Zakaria. He said that he was looking into it and that the normalization agreement between Israel and the UAE should make it easier, as well as the UAE Minister of State for Foreign Affairs said that they've been trying to acquire F-35s for 6 years. They, too, said this should make it easier for the United Arab Emirates to get the U.S.'s latest fighter jet.
Yeah, absolutely. Said that in an interview with me last week. It's an unusual itinerary for the Secretary of State's tour of the Middle East and Africa, and that itinerary causing some speculation about who might be next, Oren, in normalizing relations with Israel. Any sense from what we've heard to date?
We know that from the schedule from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, he'll be headed to Sudan. Then he'll be headed to Bahrain before stopping at the UAE and then returning to the United States. Sudan and Bahrain are considered two of those countries most likely to normalize arrangements or agreements next with Israel. Sudan's transitional leader met Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Africa either earlier this year or late last year. And Bahrain, of course, hosted the U.S.'s Economic Workshop for Peace, which was the first part of the unveiling of the White House's plan to solve the Middle East Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That has made it part of the speculation that Pompeo is trying to build on the momentum of the Israel-UAE normalization agreement and see if they can get other countries to move along with this as well. That would be another feather in the cap, if you will, another foreign policy accomplishment for the Trump administration just when they're looking to push those the most with the RNC.
Yeah, fascinating. It is the national convention for them this week, and Mr. Pompeo will address the RNC in what will be breaking a long-standing tradition that political activity, of course, is off-limits for top-level cabinet ministers, especially on foreign soil. What is the significance, then, of delivering this speech from Jerusalem, do you think?
Well, for the Trump administration, Jerusalem and everything about the Israel-U.S. agreement has been part of their big foreign policy accomplishments that they've touted pretty much all over, from moving the embassy to recognizing Israeli sovereignty in the Golan Heights. All of that has not only been something the Trump administration has hyped, but it's been an important part of their appeal to their evangelical base. this can be seen as an extension of that. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo breaking long-standing traditions and norms and making a political speech on an official visit. Now, those around Secretary of State Pompeo, those from his office have said it's him addressing the RNC in his personal capacity, that taxpayers won't foot any part of the bill for his speech, that it'll be the entire the Republican Party paying for this speech, as well as bringing in a private video company to record this. But there's no doubt that this is an official visit, and part of that official visit will be a very political speech where Pompeo touts his own accomplishments and, of course, those of President Donald Trump on this visit to Jerusalem.
What's fascinating is that foreign policy in no way tops the agenda for most US voters in this election cycle. However, as we've discussed, Pompeo's dateline in Israel is, of course, no coincidence. President Trump, after all, touting the recently brokered UAE Israel deal as a win for the White House. Thank you, Oren. Pompeo's presence in the region comes as all eyes wander then to other Arab nations, with question marks raised over if, or more so when, other countries will follow the UAE's suit. So if more of the region does move to normalise relations, what will that mean for the prospect of a Palestinian state? Elliot Gotkin reports.
From euphoria at the White House to anger and despair for the Palestinians. They see the UAE-Israel agreement as a betrayal, a deal that ends decades of understanding that progress on an independent Palestinian state must come before normalization with the Arab world.
This is trickery, and we reject it completely. And we consider it a stab in the back of the Palestinian cause.
It's a view widely shared on the Palestinian street.
A betrayal. Betrayal to the Arab nations, the Islamic nations, and to the Palestinians. The Israelis are fooling them. The UAE leaders are ignorant.
We did not expect the Emirates to take such a position. We feel they fooled us, offering support to us with their left hand and smacking us with their right hand.
On social media, the comments are even less polite. This peace agreement is an illegal child of an illegal marriage, said one. I hope the food you have there will be poisoned, said another. Here in Jerusalem, there's anger at the Israeli-Emirati agreement, but also resignation and a sense that an independent Palestinian state, with the eastern part of the city as its capital, is now further away than ever. To make matters worse, Al-Aqsa may soon see the UAE's de facto leader, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, paying a visit. He's been invited to Jerusalem by Israeli President Reuven Rivlin. The city's Grand Mufti says he's not welcome. A visit through normalization is haram, he says, forbidden because it is an implementation of the deal of the century, which foresees Jerusalem, including the holy sites, as the capital of Israel. In practical terms, though, there's little the Palestinians can do. And more Arab states may soon follow in the footsteps of the UAE. Elliot Gotkin, CNN, Jerusalem.